Welcome to Fortune Forecast. You are in my book playlist, and we are going through the book titled The Invisible Influence by Alexander Cannon. It is in the public domain. This is a story of the mystic Orient with great truths which can never die. I am Daisy, your hostess, and if you are new to my channel, welcome. And to our subscribers, thank you so much for liking the channel, for visiting in, for your comments. I really appreciate it. And if you just found us at this video and would like to grab the other chapters, please visit my book playlist and you will have access to them there. In the previous chapter, Dr. Alexander Cannon related an incident that happened with the maidservant and how he was not feeling well. Dr. Cannon and apparently the other guest that was there tried using hypnosis, but apparently it wasn't taking. And then the honored guest that was there just went over and commanded the person to get well, and they did. I found that interesting and was kind of going back to my personal experience, and even my mom, we were talking about how sometimes I'll hurt myself or bump myself into something and my brain says, oh my God, there's going to be a massive bruise on there. And all I do is I touch the area and I just say, it's going away, it's going away, it's going away, and it's going away. And I'll look and there's nothing there, and even the pain itself subsides. So there is something to be said of a strong command and pain, and also understanding what pain is. I personally don't think I have the highest tolerance of pain, but I could tell you, here I am, 60 years old, and I don't have migraines. I don't have a lot of ailments. And when I do feel a little ache or something like that, I'll just go stretch it out and I'll tell myself, hey, this is just me needing to make sure that I have circulation in here. I do believe that medicine has its place. But if I don't need to take it and be dependent on that and just, use the power of mind and also the common sense that it is important to keep the body circulating, I think that so far it's helped me. And I don't know, what are your stories? And additionally, the author covered more on the topic of the post-suggestions and hypnosis, which now science here in our current time has moved fast forward, and we see different versions of hypnotism through NLP and the power of affirmations, which is simply ourselves taking the time to override a bad program in our mind. And we have seen and have heard testimony of the effectiveness of affirmations. And please do check the description. I have several links that might give you some more information, such as an article by Military Medicine, which is put out by the AMSUS, the Society of Federal Health Professionals, where they offer their findings on the use of many different types of techniques. Even hypnotism is available through federal health professionals. Then there's the MK Ultra project. This was a top secret CIA project, which the agency conducted hundreds of clandestine experiments and sometimes to unwitting U.S. citizens. Different methods were used, including drugs, all for the effort of mind control. So you see, if your government, our government, is looking for ways to manipulate us, and let's fast forward to current now, the social media companies, such as Facebook now going through some issues with their metapixel, which is a piece of embedded code that now tracks what you're looking at on the web. It seems that there is some evidence through our use of the internet, each one of us, what we like, what we don't like, and apparently it's very predictable. So for interested companies that are trying to sell something, this information is very valuable, how our minds operate. I find this type of information intriguing, and I hope that you do too, and that in some way may serve you in understanding yourself better, understanding the world around you, and if anything, at least we're connecting at some level, right? So let me go ahead now and flip the page as we go on to Chapter 9, titled Dreams, Dissociation, and Disease. We had been discussing the dreams of King Nebuchadnezzar in the book of Daniel, chapters 1 to 6, especially his two very mystifying dreams, which were carefully analyzed by Daniel to have a very realistic meaning and came true. When once more we had an unexpected visit from the Knight Commander, whom we were delighted to again have the pleasure of meeting. I had by this time been able to confirm his telepathic communication that I had been made Knight Commander of Asia. For now I held the scrolls, the arms of office, the coat of arms, and weapons of war, which went with this noble office. So our conversation gradually drifted into the value and meaning of dreams. Dreams which perseverate into waking life. Do you know, said the knight, that Pierre de Boismont first pointed out that there were well-known dream pictures which are not recognized as dreams and are believed to be reality in waking life? The border between hallucinations and delusions and normal life is very fine. It is common knowledge with us that even well-educated persons are influenced by dreams. I have known people to be depressed the whole of the next day following an unpleasant dream. How active is the unconscious mind during the sleep state? People who dream of their complaints are definitely worse during the next few days. It is as if the unconscious mind had undivided sway over the whole mind and, for the time being, was ruler. The person who is lame will walk more lame for the next few days. Analogies of this are to be found in post-hypnotic suggestion. A person dreams of having been cured of neuralgia and has afterwards been free from pain for months and maybe forever. This is how some people interpret being cured by divine power during their sleep of the night. The same things happen in post-hypnotic suggestion. Many phenomenal cures are daily brought about in this way. On the contrary, a person who dreams for more than one night in succession that he is being chased by pirates will become more exhausted each day. The person probably will not remember the dream in the waking state, but during hypnosis will no doubt clearly recall the whole dream, so that one cannot get at the root of the trouble. The earliest signs of mental disease frequently reveal themselves in dreams and, therefore, a study of dreams, especially through subsequent hypnotically produced states, will quickly elucidate most of the patient's trouble. Aristotle wrote that a number of our dreams were responsible for our subsequent actions. As a man dreameth, so will he be. And is it not also true that, as a person is directed in the hypnotic state, so will he surely be? How visions come to be. The one-armed Knight Commander, for you will remember that he had only one arm, the right arm, for he belonged to the Order of the Right Hand, symbolic of the fact that he could destroy the power of the Order of the Left Hand or the Black Magician. He had long ago had his left arm removed by a means which could not be accounted for, humanly speaking. Said it was a long time since we had had what he termed a childish evening, so we decided to make this one an evening of simple, interesting, childish experiments, which to the uninitiated may seem of great interest, for, psychologically speaking, they have much to teach us. That evening we had a reunion dinner and dined well and also wisely. I now gave the knight an imaginary glass of bitter ale, but he deliberately scorned me for having stated an untruth and demonstrated that he had nothing in his hand. I took no notice of his empathetic denial and raised his hand to his mouth that he would drink. Slowly and with much hesitation, he drank the imaginary ale from the imaginary glass, making the proper swallowing movements in his throat and pulling a face, intimating that he had a very nasty taste in his mouth. When asked why he pulled such a face, he said he had a horrid taste in his mouth, just as if he had drunk something very tart and bitter. The suggestion had worked in spite of his reason. This is the very beginning and essence of most hallucinations. Later, I told the sage that he saw a cat sitting on the mantelpiece. This suggestion was at first rejected. He told me not to talk nonsense, for I never need expect him to believe such a silly thing. However, I repeated this suggestion several times, and the sage repeatedly denied its existence, but I then made him agree to nod his head several times. Each time, I referred to the imaginary cat, and he did as requested. The nodding of the head gradually induced the sage to accept such an hallucination, which he now clearly saw. He said, "Oh, yes, I know, but you have put the cat there since you tried to pull my leg. You cannot deceive me." Nevertheless, there was no cat there. The Knight Commander was greatly interested in these simple experiments and said, "How do you account for these phenomena?" I explained, "I firmly believe that all hallucinations are primarily the result of suggestions, either through dreams or the suggestion of others, heterosuggestion, or the suggestion of the person to himself, autosuggestion. It is interesting to relate that even these hypnotic hallucinations frequently tend to perseverate. This further explains how hallucinations sometimes come to stay in the insane. A post-hypnotic hallucination can be produced by mere suggestion during hypnosis that a person will see or hear or feel a certain thing when he wakes up. A person is told in good faith that the limb he had lost through accident would regrow during the night, and that in the morning he would have 2 normal legs when he awoke. In the morning he awoke, delighted the hypnotic sleep was allowed to continue in the ordinary sleep, believing that his leg had regrown. He having visual and kinesthetic hallucinations, he could both feel and see to this effect. For months afterwards, he said he could even walk better, as he was at times quite unconscious of his absent leg, and could therefore keep his balance perfectly using a stick, which he was accustomed to carry. Not seeing that which one sees. In order not to see a thing, that thing must first be seen, and the result is a negative hallucination. Contradiction in terms seems evident, but this is nevertheless true. Take as an example the experiments I conducted upon my chief boy, when I told him to open his eyes but not awaken, and that he would only see a column of figures on the right side of the paper when he opened his eyes. He obviously must have seen the left-hand column to know and add up the right-hand column of figures only. The sage, interrupting, said, "Could a person without hypnotic training be made not to see things in a room? If so, demonstrate it to us on the houseboy." The houseboy was called forth, and as we had only once hypnotized him deeply, I wondered for the moment how the experiment would succeed. However, nothing attempted, nothing done. So on with the work. To my gratification, I soon placed the houseboy again in a profound hypnotic sleep and then said, "You will now open your eyes without awakening, and you will be surprised to find that I alone remain in the room, the others having suddenly departed." Although 4 of us remained in the room, the Knight Commander, the sage, the chief boy, and myself. To command, he carefully walked about the room, avoiding all of them except myself, whom he could see, hear, and touch. He never by accident once bumped into one of them. It is therefore obvious that in order not to see and not to hear and not to feel them, he must first be able to see, hear, and feel them. The point is that conscience only records what it has been told by the unconscious mind to record. Illustrations to this effect can be enumerated ad infinitum. How disease can be produced and dispersed. Without awakening the houseboy, who was in mental communication with me, en rapport with me, I handed him over to the Knight Commander, whereupon the distinguished guest immediately produced intense toothache in the boy, which appeared real to us all, and most assuredly to the subject himself. With a silent mental determining, the Knight then dispersed the toothache and produced a feeling of great pleasure instead, without one word being spoken. He then made the boy suffer from pneumonia, and behold, the signs and symptoms of pneumonia were soon classical. Then, with a solitary wish, the pneumonia was dispersed. Many well-known diseases were likewise produced at will and also dispersed by a single silent command. So you see, said the distinguished guest, symptoms of disease, dis-ease, can be cultivated in the way hallucinations are produced, and symptoms can be dispersed in exactly the same way as the negative hallucination is produced. In this careful study lies the secret to the workings of many a man's mind, to many a man's sorrow or happiness. It lies within our power to turn this sorrow into happiness. Hidden memories and tales of the days of long ago. Hidden memories can easily be brought out during the hypnotic state by merely telling the person in confidence what you wish him to remember and assuring him that he will remember the facts which are also so helpful in his case, as if he had placed his hand on some magic key. The hypnotized subject speaks without hesitation of these hidden memories, just as if he were recalling the events of the day in question. This increased power of memory is known as hypnomnesia. In this direction, Benedict's time-honored case is an excellent example. Hansen hypnotized, whilst in darkest Africa, an English officer who, to his surprise, spoke in a strange tongue which was afterwards identified as the Welsh language. His history revealed that when a little child, this officer had learned to speak Welsh, but now he had long since forgotten that he had ever learnt such a language. I find that deep hypnosis is sometimes essential for this phenomena to be produced, and that even then, in some cases where the patient has a strong autosuggestion that you shall not know, he will still refuse to tell you, in no polite manner, under hypnosis, although on awakening he has no recollection whatsoever of what he has said. But the memory can be made to perseverate afterwards as a post-hypnotic suggestion, as can hallucinations and so forth. Hence, hypnosis in these cases has an excellent therapeutic use. Hypnotism, even if used in its most simple form, is of great service to mankind. Automatic writing. Whilst the Knight Commander was discussing hidden memories, the sage, who was listening intently, was at the same time drawing a castle on a piece of paper, and when challenged with the fact, would hardly believe it. That is the same thing as automatic writing, I said. The basis of automatic writing, I continued, is dissociation of the mind, as is evidenced even in slight degrees where a person can be seen whilst he is talking or listening to a speech to be scribbling something either legible or illegible on the table or some scrap of paper at hand without realizing that he is doing it at the same time. If instead of merely scribbling, words or even letters are actually written without the person being conscious that he has written such words or letters, then automatic writing has taken place. Here the sage chimed in. Moschiller and Max de Swire have carried out some very simple experiments such as the following. A person in the waking state, as in everyday life, is handed a pencil and is asked to reply to some question on paper. However, he must leave his hand still holding the pencil and forget about it. It would not be strange for such a person to write down something which passes through his mind, that is, of which he is thinking. But when I meanwhile talk to the person of various shows he has attended, of various functions we have figured in, and so forth, he unconsciously writes down L57,235, ham, kill it. This is a very different matter. It appears that the sum refers to his hope in the Calcutta sweepstake. That ham is what he ate for breakfast, and that kill it refers to some crime which a friend of his had been briefed for. This is true automatic writing. Many wonderful cases can be recorded. In hypnosis, writing can be produced at will, which, to all intents and purposes, is automatic, but is different from the above. We now went to visit a large isolated farm some few miles away. The evening was delightful, and we all enjoyed the walk, although there was no real footpath, and one had to be guided there by pure observation and instinct. As we drew nigh onto the farm, we heard the note of a singing bird. The sage commented, "How true is the adage that, as a bird is known by its note, so is a man known by his conversation." At last we arrived there, and as we entered the gate, a hen crossed our path. Animal experiments. Have you tried any of your experiments on hens and animals? Asked the knight, turning to the sage and myself. Yes, replied the sage. You may recall that in 1631, Schwenter first carried out experiments of this kind on hens. Then, in 1646, the Jesuit Kircher recorded the Experimentum Mirabile Kircheri. Schwenter's first experiment is the famous hen hypnosis. He held a hen so that its head, in particular, was pressed onto the ground. With the other hand, he then drew a thick, straight white chalk line on the ground, from the hen's beak to a distance of 3 feet away, direct in line with the hen's line of vision. The hen remained motionless so long as he left it there. In the first experiment, it remained so for half an hour. It could not move. He believed that the hen thought that it was fastened to the ground and so did not try to move. In 1872, Chermak repeated this experiment with many other birds and animals and also produced this hypnotic state in them. In 1880, Pryor began to perfect his experiments, which he had been interested in for a few years. Not only did he confirm Chermak's work, but also noted that 2 mental states could be produced. One of catalepsy, in which the animal kept its limb in any position in which they were placed, and this state he believed was due to fear, and the true hypnotic state in which the animal went as if to sleep. You will also remember that Danilowski, Hubel, Rickert, and Reiger also interested in themselves in such experiments later. Moll specialized on frogs, guinea pigs, and crayfish. In each experiment, the cataleptic, rigid states produced resembled in many ways the condition produced by the Carchot School of Paris. Rickert demonstrated that a sudden Drummond limelight produced exactly the same effect on a cock as it did on a hysterical patient. With these few remarks, the sage immediately proceeded to experiment in like manner with the hen and some other of the farmyard stock, much to the amazement of our hosts, who looked upon us even now as the Wizards of the North, a name which we had long since acquired in the East and the Far East. As it was growing dusk, we entered the farmhouse and partook of good food with the host thereof and stayed there for the night. End of chapter. Stay right here with me in this video. We're going to move on to chapter 10. And thank you. Please do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's move on. Chapter 10. Psychology and Things Occult. We spent a most enjoyable evening on the farm and rested well, to awaken in the morning feeling refreshed. When we had eaten, we made our way down to the piggery, where the night commander made many observations. Amongst the many that he made, I must recall this. The pig is obstinacy personified. Place a rope around its hind leg and draw it backwards, and it will instantly go forward. Most weak men and women portray this characteristic feature. They reveal their smallness of mind. A great mind can lead and be led. As we were leaving the piggery, the sage noticed a curious sight. He pointed to a man lying in a hammock in a profound sleep. He asked what might this state be. The farmer informed us that This servant was an addict to taking of daga or hashish, sometimes spelled hashish or hashish. The knight commander mused upon its benefits and its dangers, saying, "Hashish is known in England as cannabis indica, and is the only drug I know of which can in any way simulate the hypnotic state, apart from the second or going under stage of chloroform narcosis as an anesthetic. In hashish intoxication, the suggestion is simply a natural sensory expression received spontaneously and greatly exaggerated. The addict sees a small sheet of water, and in his dreams it becomes a magnificent river, a vast lake, or a boundless ocean. He hears a gramophone playing nearby and imagines himself listening to the orchestra of Bayreuth. A slight noise made by someone turning over the pages of a book is imagined to be a thunderstorm." Post-hashish suggestions, as with post-hypnotic suggestions, have been carried out without the person being conscious of the previous command. Moments seem like hours, and the visions are pleasant but sensuous. People frequently do not realize that the brain is a double organ both automatically and physiologically, though in normal life the two hemispheres are so functionally associated that they act as one. Such cases as those I have seen seem to show that what most observers are agreed in, concluding that under certain conditions the partnership may be dissolved and one side may act independently of the other. The dissociation of the two sides of the brain and the transference of the preponderating influence from the one to the other certainly appears to afford a plausible explanation of many of the phenomena of deep hypnosis. I also believe that the dissociation is caused by some interference phenomenon with the sympathetic nervous system, that is, the nervous system over which we have no voluntary control. This system is largely responsible for most of the phenomena of the hysteria and of many of those neurasthenia and allied conditions. It is not under the control of the will or consciousness, but can be profoundly influenced in the hypnotic and allied states, as is seen by the occasional production of the stigmata of religious ecstasy and of inflammation of the skin produced by suggestion in deep hypnosis. It is this action on the sympathetic system, the brain of systemic consciousness and organic life, through the highest cortical brain centers, constituting the ultimate court of appeal, that enables us to effect cures of functional disorders, if not cure of organic disease, by suggestion. This man is really drunk with hashish. But in England, you have people who get drunk on wine, or rather the alcohol that is within that wine. The man is, for the time being, mad, for he has temporarily lost his reason. It might be aptly put that the drunkard is mad because he drinks, that the dipsomaniac drinks because he is mad. The dipsomania is a form of impulsive insanity, as you know, which is nearly always inherited and which manifests itself by uncontrollable fits of drinking, during which the patient is obviously insane. How true is your English sing-song that, when the drink is swept away, when the drink is swept away, there'll be work for everybody, and we'll all get better pay when the pubs are closed forever and the drink is swept away. You know that a business becomes bankrupt as soon as the demand for its commodities cease. When people cease to ask for and drink alcoholic liquors, the pubs will sweep themselves away. Few people realize that hypnosis can cure both dipsomania and drunkenness, and with it, crime. All that one has to do is place the subject in deep hypnotic state and suggest to him three things, namely 1. Abhorrence of alcohol and its effect. 2. Absence of craving for it. And 3. Self-control, which is power to resist all temptation. In other words, in the deeply hypnotized subject, one has only to tell him that if he takes beer or spirits, these alcoholic drinks will at once cause him to vomit. Then, on waking him, Compel him to drink a glass of beer to produce such an attack of nausea and vomiting, and he will remember for many a day. Don't forget that old channels cannot be destroyed at once, any more than new ones can be formed in a day. Therefore, always tell the subject that it takes a month to get over the crude effects of confirmed alcoholism, and 3 months for the liver, stomach, and other organs to recover their tone. That 12 months is required for the brain power and morale to be fully reestablished. We can learn other great lessons from this one. Let us therefore always keep an open mind on all subjects, and remember that there is a vast difference between an open mind and an empty mind. Let us therefore not mistake the one for the other, either in ourselves or in others. In dealing with these cases, said the sage, I take it that ordinary consciousness makes up but a small part of a man's personality. Beneath the threshold of working consciousness, there lies not merely an unconscious complex of organic processes, but an intelligent vital control. To this the knight agreed and added, we have much to learn of hypnotism as a stimulator of effort and arouser of the will. At this moment, there was a commotion in the yard nearby. It was ascertained that one had committed a theft, and no one knew who was the thief. As a result, every man was given some rice to chew and then told to spit it out. The guilty person was so affected by terror that the rice was reduced to a fine powder, in consequence of the dryness of his mouth owing to the absence of saliva. The innocents were able to eject the whole mouthful of rice as a pulp or bolus. I pointed out to my friends, no function of organic life is more influenced by mental state than that of salivation. The thought of savory food when one is hungry is sufficient to make the salivary glands water, while fear or disgust will have an exactly opposite effect, and the mouth in consequence becomes dry and parched. The farmer said that this servant who was addicted to the taking of hashish used to dream for hours on end. This caused the sage to remark, healthy, dreamless sleep depends upon temporary abolition of the functions of the highest centers of the brain, together with a partial inhibition of those below the middle and lower levels of the nervous system. In the dreamful and disturbed sleep, inhibition is less complete, and certain areas continue to discharge nervous energy and so produce dreams. The more intense the discharge, the more vivid the dreams. And if the discharge to be very intense, the attending process may overstep the limit of mere ideation and take the form of action. There will be actual movement or sleepwalking from the stimulation and discharge of the motor areas. The actions will be unaccompanied by consciousness, for consciousness depends upon the functioning of all the higher centers in orderly relation. In somnambulism, this order is disarranged or destroyed. The actions, being unconscious, are automatic and tend to partake of the nature of those usually or habitually performed. They will be in keeping with the character and temperament of the sleeper, for the nervous discharges will travel through well-worn and accustomed channels and will hardly effect new combinations of movements. The post-epileptic state following the epileptic fit shows some very different resemblances to hypnotic somnambulism. The researches of Hewlings-Jackson and other observers enable us to understand this phenomenon. The mind is a much more complicated and greater thing than most people imagine, and the theory of it being part of a universal mind is favored by the fact that under special circumstances and in rare instances, a subject who has been hypnotized a great number of times by the same operator may be sent to sleep by the hypnotizer exerting his will at a distance. The family were not known by names but by numbers, as is quite common in China. Hence, the eldest of the family was called 1, and the next 2, and so on. After a short discussion concerning the various members of the farmer's fine family of 12, our conversation gradually turned to the theory of Pythagoras, not only regarding the fact that he was the first philosopher to state that the earth was round, but that he was the great genius who showed that anything and everything in the world, including the world itself, was made up of vibrations, which vibrations emanated from these objects, be they living beings or mineral. That the type of vibration varied enormously. Then the Knight Commander suggested that we might, with advantage, at least review the work of Pythagoras on numerology. Pythagoras believed that all numbers had significance and that every letter in a name had a significance in relationship to its place in the alphabet. That if a person changed his name or added a hyphen name to it, a practice as old as the hills, it meant that he had really changed his outlook on life, due to slight changes in his inward vibrations, and to make the vibrations be in harmony without knowing it, unconsciously. He had the desire to change his name, although he had a superficial conscious reason which was little more than a rationalization. The date of birth, with the month and the day, all have a numerical significance, pointed out the Knight. And further, the methods of use have changed but little since the date of introduction in the year 562 BC. The idea was to place the letters of the alphabet under the numbers 1 to 10, and then to repeat the placing from left to right until all the numbers of the alphabet were exhausted. By this means, every letter had a number allocated to it. He also showed that the names of colors themselves are significant, in that they fit in with the natural vibration of the color, no matter what language is used, which is either a strange coincidence or a notable fact. Pythagoras further taught that even months had relationships to colors, as had also people themselves. This accounted for certain people preferring certain colors and certain forms of address. In other words, the psychology of numerology and its apparent relationship to colors, names, dates of birth, and even the professions is a matter worthy of consideration. Even the Bible has a book of numbers, and the significance given therein is no mere trifling observation. The conversation now became very interesting. The farmer's wife asked if there was any importance as regards destiny in the date of birth of an individual, especially since Pythagoras laid such stress on dates and numbers. The sage replied, "Don't you know that there is a philosophy older than that of Pythagoras, which we call astrology, the study of the stars in relationship to the destiny of mankind, horses, trees, and stones. Even the New Testament refers to the wise men predicting the birth of a Savior to this world by a study of the stars in this connection. Do we not read of the wise men being guided by a star, the Star of Bethlehem? We are all predestined with a general compass, but our individual efforts can either improve or make worse that allotted destiny. The study of the stars is merely a rough guide, but nothing more. Nevertheless, it is useful to know what the stars foretell. English astrology is not the same as Indian astrology, as the methods vary enormously, but the strange thing is that the results are identical. There is an explanation which has never been given, which I think is of enormous value in assessing the true value of astrology to mankind. Think for a moment. This world itself is magnetic and is suspended in space. In that great space are suspended many other worlds, which we call, for convenience, planets. There are yet other little worlds, which we call stars. Now we have previously held that the human body is magnetic, and therefore animal magnetism does exist. Therefore, we all are magnetic. The world, the other worlds, else how could they remain in space if it were not for the magnetic attraction of some and repulsion of others, so keeping a sort of equilibrium? We know that the position of these worlds vary from time to time. We further know that they take a particular course over a specified number of years. From this, we deduce that the magnetic influence of these worlds collectively will vary upon the Earth's surface from time to time. Now, when a nail is first magnetized by being brought into contact with a magnet, it retains for some time afterwards, only in a much less degree, the same type of vibratory magnetic force as does the magnet. Now think for a moment. The newborn babe may be likened to the new nail which for the first time comes into existence at birth, and then picks up a magnetic vibration of its own which persists at that time on the Earth's surface due to the position of the various planets at the date of birth. As the vibrations become fixed in type at this stage, it will be seen that during life the various planets vary in position, and as their effect upon the Earth varies, so will it affect the mental and physical vibrations of that particular human being accordingly. This brings in a most interesting link between an apparently empirical study and true science by linking up the magnetic theory with astrology. Whilst discussing astrology, there is another interesting factor to note. Most astrologers speak of some of the planets at birth, for instance, being squared, and believe that this is an evil omen. Experience has taught me a belief far different from this. A planet that is squared means definitely lack of rest or remaining where one is, as it indicates a dynamic force which stirs things up. If used aright, it is the very thing which will lead to great success, far above that of others. If horoscopes were read from this angle, much useful advice could be given. Apart from the psychological aid to success which the very suggestion would bring forth. Indeed, astrology is a science as old as the hills, and the very fact that it has stood the test of time speaks in its favor. And now it was time to depart. So having said farewell, which means may you always do well, keep well, and fare thee well. To our most delightful farmer hosts, we went on our way rejoicing. A few hours' walk brought us back to our cave dwelling, where we prepared to rest for the night. And as we were about to pass into the sleep state of this material world, a telepathic message came through to all of us with a clearness and decisiveness which could not be mistaken. It rang in our ears over and over again. On the morrow thou shalt go further on, having sown good seed wherever thou last rested thy body, and thou shalt be brought here to the monastery on high, the sacred Lama of all time. The knight commander who was with thee a moment ago, but is now here, will, in the twinkling of an eye, return for thee. When thou hast come to the river, 5 miles distant, which canst not be crossed by human means, so rapid is its flow, so precipitous the cliff to the water on either side. When thou hast reached the spot, help will be given thee from on high. We slept peacefully and deeply. On the morrow, we arose at sunrise and prepared to depart. End of chapter. All right. If you haven't done so, go ahead, hit that like button. I thank you so very much for that. And if you like what you see and hear on this channel, subscribe and share it with your friends. And leave me your comments. Let me know what you think of this particular book and anything on this chapter. Let's move on to the next video. I'll be there with Chapter 11, The Way to the Abode of Learning and Love.